TNKR Media.
Welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs, where we deliver wisdom and valuable advice directly from Canadian business leaders. Presented as always by BDO Canada. Read more thought leadership and expert advice from the BDO team at bdo.ca. My name is Dan Delmar of TNKR Media.
And my name is Michael Newton from BDO Canada.
Today, Mike, we're doing a guest update show. So we've done this a couple of times, but I figured it's time to catch up because a lot of our alum from the past few years have really been skyrocketing. I mean, we're really quite shocked to see how some have grown. So we do have a big update show today, including a lot of various news, which we'll get to, the Trump administration, what it means for Canada. We also have the Canadian dollar, which is on people's minds in the business community. But we will catch up with three inspiring entrepreneurs from Lufa Farms, Bad Monkey Popcorn, and Manmade brand underwear, all three locally founded, all three experiencing really rapid growth over the last few years.
Yeah, fascinating to look back at these three companies, where they were when we first interviewed them, where they are today, and I'm anticipating we'll see some similarities in the way they look forward on things and the way that they try to address future proofing and the economic world that we're living in right now. So I don't think there's a coincidence that the three of them are continuing to be successful when we get them on air again.
There's something that ties them all together. They're all e-commerce, but they're all doing real physical things. They're producing materials locally. Very inspirational. I mean, when we talk about how we as an economy can get back going and how we can future-proof ourselves against myriad uncertainty, which we'll get to in a few minutes, one great way is to support local manufacturers and people putting Canadian products out to the world.
So is this where I'm supposed to say I'm offended because you think that the professional paper pushers like CPAs are not contributing to the economy? I'll leave that one for another show.
Just not as much.
Okay, that's what it is. I got you. Yeah, some days I'm not going to argue with you on that one.
Hey, I'm a media guy. I'm contributing even less.
Yeah, okay. As I said, we're selling, as one of my partners used to say, air, wind, and steam, right, at the end of the day. So, no, look, it is fascinating, and I love these shows, but I love looking at, like you said, the type of things that we're talking about. Two of them are in the food area, and one of them is clothing, and pretty old businesses at the end of the day when you think about it, with a whole brand new scenario and a whole brand new twist on this. And there's no surprise that with being e-commerce that they're a younger group. I don't think there's any surprise that they have this massive amount of passion and love for what they're doing. And I also don't think there's any coincidence that they've been successful based on how they all pretty much stick to what they're doing and what they know best. It's tempting for a lot of young entrepreneurs to take things in 27 different directions. And I think we're going to see from our three entrepreneurs today that they've stuck to some pretty basic fundamentals.
So very happy with the update show. You're going to love it. Mohammed Haj from Lufa Farms is up first. Then we have Robert Marzin from Manmade brand, and then Fabio Zappilli from Bad Monkey Popcorn. So that's all on the way. Now, first, Mike, let's get to the uncertainty, of course.
What uncertainty?
Everything's fine. We'll get to the Trump cabinet appointments in a moment. But first, we may be already feeling the impacts. The Canadian dollar has weakened to its lowest position against the US dollar in over 4 years. Will our dollar continue to trend downward? And what does that mean for business, Mike?
Well, you started this whole thing with the term uncertainty. And there's one thing that I can tell you for certain is uncertainty creates a lot of uncertainty. And that feeds on itself. So I anticipate we're going to see a lot of up and downs over the next 6 months as Trump takes power, as he shuffles in his new cabinet picks, and what that is going to mean. There's a lot of trepidation in the market right now. I was down in Houston this week for a couple of days with a client, and the conversation about what to expect or what not to expect, or not even to know what to expect at the end of the day, is on everybody's tongue, whether that's north of the border here in Canada and what that effects are going to be on us, or what's happening anywhere in the U.S. And it's interesting because Houston is notoriously blue in a state that is predominantly red. And it was a very interesting dynamic and discussion of what business looks like while you're sitting in the oil patch.
I have to ask because over the last few days, you've spent some time in a blue state and then in a red state. When you're a Canadian going down there to do business, especially at this time, you must kind of be careful, especially when you meet new people, about kind of remaining as neutral as you can.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as some of you may know, I do spend my summers down in Saratoga, New York. And Saratoga during the summer is a hotbed of thoroughbred horse racing, which brings together a lot of the who's who and a lot of wealthy people from around the U.S. and Canada. So I've learned to play nicely, having lived the summers in Saratoga, because you never know who exactly you're talking to at the end of the day and where their political stance is. But yeah, over the last few weeks, I was in San Diego, I was in Houston, and you get a very interesting. You almost want to keep your voice down sitting in a restaurant when you start the conversation, because you never know who's listening and where that's going to go right now. And there's no doubt that the political. I was in San Diego before the election and Houston after, so it's been an interesting few weeks of traveling around. And yeah, I think as a Canadian, traditionally we learn to play nicely with the other kids in the sandbox. So I think by default, we start off a little hesitant and not wanting to be too boisterous in terms of whatever your opinion may be. But man, I cannot believe. I mean, I was sitting in the bar the other night in Houston, and the bartender went off on politics and in a whole different direction. The driver in a car. It doesn't matter who you talk to. There's somebody out there that has an opinion, and most of them have no clue where we're going.
Well, that's reassuring. I'll let you comment on some of the Trump cabinet picks. We'll probably avoid some of the wackier political ones. It's more of a political talk show thing, but one that certainly impacts the business audience is the looming return of USTR, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. So according to Politico, the world could be in store for an economic upheaval. Lighthizer was the architect of the United States' aggressive use of tariffs and other trade restrictions against friend and foe alike, abandoning decades of U.S. support for free trade. His policy revolution was subsequently embraced and expanded by the Biden administration. What do you make of this impending possible appointment?
Oh yeah, President-elect Trump's former trade chief and those close to him are preparing to aggressively sell their plans and new tariffs on imports that will go way beyond anything we saw in the first term. So I think this is going to continue to move forward. I think Mr. Lighthizer is going to continue to push that agenda. As we'll get to in a few moments, most of his cabinet appointment selections are pushing the Trump agenda, and I think we're going to certainly going to see the fear factor associated with a lot of these tariffs that are going to come in. And it's like I said, traveling around, it's amazing to talk to people and what their opinion is on the tariffs. Some think, well, because they're friends of the U.S., that they will be exempt. Others feel it's going to be across the board. Some people think it's going to be, a fear with the new trade renegotiation between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. in 2026. People are going to be hesitant to be too aggressive with Trump before they go back to the table. So how did you start this, Dan? Uncertainty? That's what we're in for some more of.
And let's add a little more to the mix in terms of Canadian news this week. A postal strike was launched yesterday as the feds have legislated Montreal and Vancouver port workers back to work. We do tape this show on Friday so that at least one of us can have a semblance of a Sabbath. But nonetheless, they were supposed to be back at work Saturday morning. The government has been signaling that it has a short fuse for labor disputes at this time.
Well, the government's got a lot of problems, and the last thing they need is labor disputes across this country. So the Liberals' support is already low and continues to wane. So I'm not too sure, how much tolerance they're going to have. Having said all of that, if you take this back about 30 seconds and we go back to the Trump administration and tariffs, we're going to have to be firing on all cylinders in Canada if we want to be competitive, and we can't afford to take trade disputes and shutdowns going forward.
Okay, so overall, a lot of uncertainty. What's the top line advice that we can give to entrepreneurs heading into the next week or two, as we see this massive appointments and the policies start to take shape? Obviously, is looking at other markets perhaps something that should be top of mind?
I would think by now we've become accustomed to living in uncertainty. You go back to the COVID. It's been a pretty interesting 15, 16 years as you go back into the late 2008, the meltdowns in the financial markets. It's 16 years of constant uncertainty. We get, periods in there where we have a very short memory of what's gone on and everything goes well and we go, hey, the world's going to be great forever. The reality is, I don't think there's a successful entrepreneur out there right now that is not anticipating uncertainty in one way or another. So I think for anybody who has not been looking forward, who has not spent their time trying to anticipate what the world is going to look like tomorrow, I think that should be on every radar of every single entrepreneur. So yeah, we're joking about the uncertainty and it's coming back. Yeah, there's no doubt it's there. Should it be crippling us? Should it be, handcuffing us? Definitely not. I think sometimes it makes for a good sell when we talk on these things, when we like to push on the uncertainty. But the reality is, at the end of the day, we're used to uncertainty. We've been living in this the last little while. So I'm not going to lose sleep over the uncertainty in the world that we're dealing with right now. What I do want to do is I want to make sure people are properly educated. I want to make sure people are doing and reading and not living in a bubble, sticking their head in the sand, because I think that is part of dealing with the uncertainty. And as we will see from our three guests later on, they're always thinking forward in terms of what could go wrong. And the more you can stick to your guns, stick to the focus of which you're good at, the better chance you have. And times of uncertainty are a great environment to make something out of it. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we live in a flock mentality where everybody panics, everybody follows. Those people that have broken away from following the crowd when it comes to these things have made some major successes for themselves. And I look at a period of uncertainty not in the negative. I look at a period of uncertainty as a positive, as an opportunity at the end of the day. So no matter how much we might have some fun with all of this uncertainty coming up, I think we need to stick to that thought that, hey, you know what? This is an opportunity that presents itself. And as you mentioned, is that looking into a different market? Is that finding a different way to manufacture? Is that finding, different staff base? Yeah, but nothing lasts forever. And if we've learned one thing, our world changes so quickly that I believe uncertainty is part of every business plan these days, or should be.
A little more current events chat for the podcast audience now. Mike, I think let's leave mostly the uncertainty aside. My only comment, I hope you back me up on this, is that the fundamentals of one's business remain the same if it's a crisis time or not.
110%. And I tried to slip that in before, maybe I wasn't clear, but I totally agree with you on this, Dan, is you're building a solid business. Are you going to have fluctuations? Are you going to have ups and downs? Are you going to have some good and some bad? Yeah, look, anybody who thinks differently is not living in the world that the rest of us are living in. So realistically speaking, I totally agree. You stick to your fundamentals. You're going to take opportunities when they present themselves. And I think in an environment where you stick to your fundamentals, but that you look at these times as an opportunity to take stuff to the next level, always sticking to what that fundamental base is, right? I'm not talking about, making men's underwear and then turning around and opening a Lufa farm atop a Walmart in the same business, right? You got to be sticking to what you're good at. But having said all of that, I totally agree with you.
This from Forbes.com on assumptions and the blue dot theory. When assumptions cloud your view, real connections, Forbes writes, suffer. A psychologist explains the blue dot theory. What is the blue dot theory?
So it's really interesting because I was at an event last night and this topic came up, funny enough, in terms of the way we see things. And, we all know what it's like when you feel like you're sitting in the hot seat. So you go to an event, you're at a cocktail, you're in a large gathering, but basically feel like everybody's watching us. We're kind of like that spotlight feel. And, part of it, I think, revolves around a very much of a me world that we're living in today. So I'm so important, so the spotlight must be on me, even if nobody's looking at me type of mentality. But it's interesting because it makes us so highly conscious of who we are, that to a point where we don't always be who we are because we're so self-conscious. We're not in the moment. We're not, living in the present when we're at something. Often what happens is you're projecting assumptions. And I find this interesting because I've done this for years. I look at somebody and I go, oh, is my tie on straight, or is my hair mussed? And I'm like, well, because I do that to other people, so that means everybody else must be doing it and looking at me, and you become highly self-conscious. There's an interesting point. I've had this conversation many times. I don't always listen to all our radio shows after the fact, Dan. Why? Because I don't focus on anything but me. I focus on the tone. I focus on the way I stumbled through a word. I focus when I said and when I should have said or. And I'm thinking, oh my God, everybody just heard me sound like an idiot. And realistically, nobody's listening to that. Yeah, somebody's gonna, they're gonna say, yeah, well, Mike didn't pronounce that word, but it doesn't necessarily take away from the word. So we all have these issues, and this being in public creates, and this is what they're calling the blue dot effect. And you lead to snap judgments instead of being curious. Oh, that's what's going on there. This is what's happening, and you often feel like you're constantly under the microscope. And let's face it, folks. None of us are that important to be always under the microscope.
Especially when you mix in social media, that sort of funhouse mirror effect can really distort a leader's vision of things. This from Fortune: why are Gen Zers having trouble getting into the workforce? Of course, one of the big ones is for me anyway, Mike, the fact that they've had a rough entry into the workforce with the pandemic and everything, rougher than certainly many comparable generations. Here, Fortune is looking at a couple of factors. One, anxiety, depression, and also the commute and the cost of living, which is getting people down.
Yeah, I think when we live in times of uncertainty, and I think we come through where we've been, people don't see the long-term vision. They see the short-term in front of them. And unfortunately, I think what's happening is that people are looking is, well, I can't take that job because the commute is going to cost me X dollars, or I got to buy a certain uniform, or I got to go out and buy suits. So the cost associated with that, $65,000 starting job, well, I'm behind the 8 ball by 10 grand before I even start, between, traffic and the commute and parking and everything else. So, the assumption can't be, and I know it's very difficult, is it can't be, oh my God, it's killing me today in terms of this pricing model, but it's about, are you getting into something where there is a potential to do more? And I think this speaks very largely to the lack of confidence that a lot of Gen Zers have in what their future looks like. And I'm not sure it's as much about, the price of a car or the price of a bus pass as it really is about that ability to see the potential down the road where they may take a job that's not paying so much today as a step into the next realm of what they're doing. I can also say that the discussion also goes from, well, wait a second, why should I be starting this low? I mean, there's a little bit of that in there too, right? I got all this education. Why do I want to drive? I can work from home. I can put all the money into my pocket. I can live with, I can live with mom and dad in the basement and make 50 or 60 grand and pocket it all. So I think there's a little bit of a lack of reality that comes into play in this discussion as well. And it's difficult because, without that prospect, without that feeling like you're going into something with hope that your 50 becomes 100, becomes 150, becomes a $200,000 job, you don't see today's cost as potentially an investment into the future, but rather the oh crap, this is what this is going to look like for a long time.
Lastly for today, I like this story from HBR, Harvard Business Review. Stop ignoring your high performers. They write, managers often make a costly mistake in leaving high performers to perform at their maximum capacity without support, choosing instead to devote their time and attention to underperformers. In doing so, these high performers are often left feeling overlooked and neglected. Contrary to popular belief, high performers need just as much attention.
For everybody will understand this statement. This equates to elementary and high school. This equates to those environments where you have a child who is a little bit ahead of everybody else, and because the system is such that you can't afford to look after 25 kids in the class, you take the children who can learn on their own, can advance on their own, and cannot disrupt the class, and you put them on one side and say, you're so much smarter than everybody else, go, do. They don't get the support, and said for years, and I can remember this, that, even at this age, I can remember elementary school where, you had basically 3 categories. You had the troubled kids, you had the, shall we call them more advanced kids, and then you had the middle group, which was always much larger. Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, we are taught as humans to manage the outliers in one way or another so that they don't disrupt the group. And unfortunately, I think when we're talking about employees and employment environment, it's easy to manage somebody who is excelling or is outperforming because it doesn't require as much of your effort. The low performers, well, unlike school, where, the kids need to stay in school, you can get rid of your low performers in a business and fire them. And then you focus on bringing the mass together, the group together. Well, those kids in school or those employees who are ahead of everybody else need as much support to continue to raise their game proportionately as well. So what ends up happening is if you don't look after your high performers, you run the risk that somebody else will, okay, provide them an opportunity, or B, you lower the gap between themselves and the rest of the pack. When we live in a world right now where we need high performers, we need people who are going to be future leaders, we need people who are going to see things differently, and by putting them in their own little realm, in their own little world, I think is detrimental to the future.
Let's get to our show. We have Mohammed Haj first up from Lufa Farms. Mike, you're going to love this story about what they did with a Walmart roof on the 40 and the 15 here in Montreal. I mean, they're churning out pallets of cucumbers and peppers every single day from this farm, this nondescript farm in the middle of Midtown Montreal. It's incredible. So Mohammed Haj up next with Lufa Farms on our big guest update show. Inspiring Entrepreneurs, presented by BDO Canada. Don't forget to go to bdo.ca for more thought leadership and business analysis. Our big update show, and we were very excited to have our next guest on because this company just keeps growing, keeps gaining steam, and is really a part of the solution in terms of how we develop our cities. Lufa Farms is the company, and joining us right now is the CEO of Lufa Farms, Mohammed Haj. Hello, Mohammed. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me.
First things first, we caught up with your former co-CEO, Lauren, a few years ago. She has now moved over to the board, and you are now in a sole CEO role. What has happened in the last couple of years for Lufa Farms? Because it seems like you guys are growing at a pretty rapid pace. And we'll talk about that big project with Walmart off the 40 in central Montreal. But what's new lately?
Sure. I mean, ever since we created Lufa, we've had kind of a steady growth rate, roughly growing at about 30 to 50% year after year. And our goal with Lufa is to keep refining the technology, build farms that are lower cost of construction and higher yield to be able to bring our food prices down so that our model can be accessible to more and more consumers around Montreal. So we've had kind of a steady growth rate. I think around 2022 is when we had the first kind of challenge in growth. With the economic downturn, we saw a lot of people more hesitant to spend on local organic. And we saw kind of a more challenging time growing. We had our first 2 flat years in 2022, 2023, and we even saw the kind of company going back to losing the profitability that we had worked so hard to get to. So we had a relatively challenging post-COVID a couple years. I think our answer to that was to keep going. We really are thinking, 40, 50 years down the line, we're trying to build really an industry and a better model for growing food and distributing food in the city. So we kept going. We lowered our prices. We onboarded a couple of new projects as well. A large farm on top of Walmart in Marché Central, and then our first indoor farm that grows greens on a year-round basis using LED lights. And that really has enabled us to continue, go back to our growth curve. So I think this is a year for us where we're able to go back to the black and at the same time go back to growing. We despite the fact that we've grown a fair bit, we're only feeding about 2 to 3% of the city of Montreal. So we still have a long way to go to achieve our mission. We're focused on bringing our prices down further by building better farms and farms that are more efficient and easier to build. So that's kind of the main focus for the company right now. We are looking actively at our next site in Montreal. We want it to be bigger, more efficient. We want the farm to grow more varieties of food. We're also at the same time building our partnerships with different food makers and food vendors. And we recently launched our own commercial kitchen where we're doing juices using the fruit from our partners. So there's a number of projects on the go. We are yet to replicate the model outside of Montreal. This is kind of the next big milestone for Lufa. But we have kind of been, we are more cautious considering the economic situation that the world is in.
That's great. I appreciate your honesty about sort of the struggles that everyone has during the pandemic. And when you mentioned, getting more efficient, reducing your prices, anything else that could inspire anything else that could inspire entrepreneurs in terms of a pandemic pivot or learning lessons from the pandemic that you'd like to share?
It's very important to keep in mind that the pandemic is temporary. And I think, when we first entered the pandemic, we saw a massive increase in demand for Lufa. Obviously, we were in the right spot. We were delivering online. We didn't have a physical store. So with the confinement, people, we even had to build a wait list for our subscription service. But we knew very, very well from that point that this is only temporary. So we didn't overexpand. We didn't well, we did expand. We didn't overexpand, and we kept focus on the cost. And when the economy when COVID ended in a way, I mean, and everything went back to normal, we were in a position where we had very high cost because everything was more expensive and lower demand. But because we had kept that efficiency at core, we were able to kind of grow out of that within a year or so. I think my advice to entrepreneurs is just focus on the long term. And if you can think it, you can do it. We knew very well that we had become less efficient during COVID because we had to grow really fast, hire a lot of people, but we could go back to a better level of efficiency. So it was really the basics, running the business well, focusing on cost, focusing on efficiencies, eliminating waste, eliminating travel, packaging, the basics that will get us to create a food system that's more profitable and more sustainable.
Excellent. And last time you guys were teasing a big project before you came on our show. It would have been, I suppose, the project on Walmart, which is at the 40 and the 15 in Montreal. For those that don't know, that's kind of in Midtown Montreal, one of the busiest en route intersections probably in the entire country. Very large volume that you're doing there. Tell us about that project and how much of your operation that it's feeding.
Yeah, so we launched that farm a few months back, and it's been incredible. I mean, we're growing cucumber and peppers there. I think at peak we're harvesting around 4 to 5 pallets of each variety per day. So a tremendous amount of food that's being picked every single day. What we really like about that site is I think all the hard work over the last kind of 12 years, you can see it in that site. It's a much better designed greenhouse. It grows about 20-30% more food than the site that we built just a few years before at Ville Saint Laurent. We're able to grow food as well with lower cost because we have better energy efficiency at that site. We have LED lighting, double curtains, insulated glass as well. So we've integrated a lot of technologies to reduce the cost of energy and the cost of growing the food. So we're growing more food with less cost, which really allowed us to bring a tremendous amount of cucumber and peppers to the marketplace at more affordable prices, which is the goal with every farm we build. But what's really also great about that site is it's built on top of a standard building. I mean, our greenhouses to date have been built on top of very solid, overbuilt buildings. The Sears location that we have at Ville Saint Laurent is a bit of a bunker. But this last greenhouse that we built is built on top of a shopping center, and that makes it very replicable. So we finally feel we're close to a platform or a model of a farm that costs where the costs are reasonable. The production is excellent, and it's very replicable as well. And that's the farm that we're hoping to replicate in the future, and maybe in other cities as well in the very near future.
You mentioned better insulation, LED lighting. I'm really interested in vertical farming and how that could be a solution for our cities. So kind of stacking the farming up on top of each other. You're doing some experimenting there as well, I take it.
Yeah. So at the same time, we launched the farm on top of Walmart, but we also launched our first indoor farm, not vertical. It's actually indoors, but at single level because the space did not permit us to go vertical. But nevertheless, it's the same concept. You simply stack it higher. And that's our first experiment, really growing food with only LED light, with no natural sunlight. And it's gone very, very well so far. We have challenges. We have to relearn how to grow food because the environment is different. You don't have sun, you don't have the variability, but you also don't have the same light spectrum, the same air exchanges that you would have if you were in a natural greenhouse. So we've had to learn and adapt our model. But we love it. And we do think that for certain things that don't require a lot of light, notably lettuces, bok choys, herbs, growing under LED lights in an area like Quebec makes a lot of sense because we have access to renewable energy. We have access to a lot of old buildings that might have space that's no longer useful for warehousing that could be utilized, could be converted um, to farms. And what's really unique about that farm is it's a farm that doesn't use natural gas for heating. So all the energy that's used to produce the food is actually renewable. And when it comes down to water, well, we're irrigating, like in all of our farms, we're drip irrigating and recirculating the water. But we also capture the humidity there in the air, and we use that humidity back into our production system because it is a closed loop air system as well. So you end up having a farm that doesn't lose any water at all, except for the vegetables and the actual harvest that you extract out of that farm. So from a sustainability perspective, it's a bit of an upgrade when it comes down to producing lettuce. And it's year round. We're producing. We can produce up to 20,000 units of greens per day. There, we're not at that level yet. We're hoping in about a year or two we'll achieve that level. But we're quite happy with that experimentation. And it was a bit of a leap of faith for us because we didn't want to build a subscale farm. So we went immediately with a 120,000 square foot farm. It was close to a $10 million investment. So we're happy to know that it wasn't. It was a good move.
And just a little bit of overtime now with Mohammed from Lufa Farms. I mentioned to you as a subscriber in past years until we unfortunately moved out of the zone, but I love really the offerings and the products. And when I look at Lufa, I'm very excited about the future of cities, frankly, because if we have enough greenhouses like yours in major cities, we're going to address a lot of food insecurity issues, a lot of pricing and inflation issues. What are you looking at in terms of big picture? A lot of people are talking about supply chain, inflation. How are you addressing this head on?
I mean, we're big believers that when it comes down to fresh vegetables, we can grow everything we need right here in cities, on rooftops, and in certain cases indoors. From where we're sitting, we have to mature the technology. Today, when we build a greenhouse, it's still costing us about twice as much as a farm that's on the ground. So we have a technology roadmap where we know we need to get certain structural wins, certain architectural wins, certain code adjustments to be able to get to the point where we're building rooftop farms on top of buildings that cost exactly the same as farms on the ground. And at that point, this really becomes a bit of a no-brainer. You would never think of building a building without putting a greenhouse on top. So for us, we have a 30, 40-year view of our business, and it is a technological problem. It is a technology problem. I mean, I feel like when I'm talking about it, it feels like it's 1980s and I'm holding a solar panel and I'm trying to convince the world that this is the future. The cost has to go down, the efficiency has to go up. It's the same for us. But we're getting there. And I think, 20, 30 years down the line, we expect all tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers in all major cities to be grown on rooftops.
It's amazing. And what do you think about the real estate in Montreal? Have you had an eye towards big partnerships of complexes or larger projects to house people and feed them within the same geographic area, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, we're always on the lookout for partnerships. I think we've been very lucky to date to have some amazing partnerships with real estate owners that have supported us and have given us the roofs as platforms. But we certainly would love to partner up with folks that are building new buildings. I think our last project with Walmart is a bit of an eye opener because there's a lot of Walmarts being built and there's a lot of IKEAs being built. Can we be part of that platform from the beginning, create a more efficient way to build them, and not have to maybe rethink every time the engineering and the architecture every time we have a new greenhouse? So that's a challenge that we have to solve. But I feel that real estate developers are also thinking the same way. I think everybody's trying to make their buildings more sustainable, come up with ways of improving the usage of the sites and the energy as well. I think greenhouses receive a lot of the heat from the building below, but they also insulate the building. And in the summertime, they do cool it. So I think everything is converging towards urban farming, being integrated into new construction.
Excellent. Lastly, just on the tech, and we've seen so many advances with AI in recent years. Any game changers for you in terms of tech that have really taken you to the next level?
I'd say a few, but we certainly see a lot more coming. I mean, I'll give you a small example. Since the inception of the company, we've always relied on the base basket. As a lufavore, you're going to get a set of vegetables and products that our team has selected. And about a year ago, we decided to replace that with an algorithm and AI. So now your base basket is built based on your past preferences. And it actually gets it super right and keeps getting better and better. So every time I forget to customize my basket, I'm pleasantly surprised. I actually got compliments from my kids and my mom not long ago saying, "Hey, you did an excellent job customizing the basket," and it was an AI basket. So I feel like we've had good successes there, although it's the start. And we're trying to implement AI in all of our operations, things along the lines of forecasting, dynamic pricing as well. There's a number of areas where AI can do an excellent job at helping make the food system more efficient and to reduce waste. But we still have a lot of learning to do, and it is such a new field. We've done I think a couple of months back we did a competition across the whole company, who could submit the best AI project, and we got 20 submissions from all the departments, and that helped spread the word that, hey, this exists, use it every day, challenge it, see how it can integrate into your company. That exercise was really excellent because ever since everybody uses AI on a day-to-day basis, and we're finding more and more uses for it.
Mohammed Haj, CEO of Lufa Farms. Again, we're all of our team here, even behind the scenes, are obsessed with Lufa. Whenever we go to someone's house and we see those gray bins, we know that they're eating well. Best of luck. Do stay in touch with us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Ben.
Inspiring Entrepreneurs, our guest update show. A few days ago, Mike spoke to Robert Marzin, one of the 4 co-founders of Manmade. They make comfortable undergarments and ship them right out of their facility here in Montreal. They've been growing a lot and attracting celebrity endorsements. Here's the chat.
I'm here with Rob Marzin from Manmade. Rob, welcome and great to have you back.
Thanks for having me back, Mike.
I for those of people that didn't listen to the show that was during season 15, why don't you just give us a little bit of an update? What is Manmade, and how did you get started?
We're 4 childhood friends. We've known each other since pretty much 5 years old, and now we're about 35, so we've known each other 30 years, and we all worked in the finance industry for about 10 or so years. 2021, we decided to quit our finance jobs and start an underwear company from scratch. And it essentially came from a need because we all had the same problem, the chafing, riding up, constant adjusting, and we had trouble finding something that was sufficient on the market. And when we did, we found that it was really expensive. It was like $50-$60, and it was hard to find. So we said, hey, how hard can it be to create underwear? Well, lo and behold, it was very difficult, but we finally did by using a modal fabric. It's sourced on the beech tree, 3 times softer than cotton, but it won't stretch out. And right now we're in year 4 of the business. We have over 6,000 5-star reviews. We are up to 35 employees, which is wild.
That's awesome. And you're located in Montreal. So for everybody who's wondering, can people walk in? Do you have a retail location, or is this purely the office space that you have is purely your own office?
Yeah, so we are based out of Montreal, but it's really our operation. So we have our offices and we have a warehouse here as well where we ship everything out from, but no storefront as of yet.
I always find it interesting, Rob, how people that start their life in the old-fashioned kind of finance industries and business guys, how you turn out making underwear. It's a little bit of a shift in culture. Where did the entrepreneurial side come from? Was it always there for you guys? Is this something, obviously at the end of the day, a good entrepreneur can make just about anything. So if you've got that spirit, which you guys clearly do, where did it come from and how did you hone it?
Yeah, I think just the whole entrepreneurial spirit is just about a mentality of never giving up. It's finding a solution to a problem and doing whatever it takes till you find the answer. And all 4 of us have some sort of a background. When I was 15, 16, I used to have a grocery delivery service before it even was popular back in the day. So I would go to a grocery store and do deliveries for old folks' homes. I also used to sell flowers, seasonal flowers during the summer when it was planting season. So 3, 4, 5 years. And then I started working into the bank, and I had aspirations of making it up and becoming a VP and president, etc. And I just found that it's tough in that environment because you have certain ideas, but it needs to go through 4, 5, 6 different pillars before it finally gets approved. And my friends and I had the same kind of issue, and we said, let's start something from scratch. It's a much bigger risk, but let's see if our ideas can actually, work, right? Maybe they're not that bad after all. And it's been fun because we feel like we're playing a game every day. We do what we love, and we see the fruits of our labor. I mean, we could see year over year we're up a 3x over last year. The previous year we were up 4.5x. So we're growing. We're doing something right, and we're having fun while we're doing it.
What does the near future look like for you in terms, say, the next 12 months? Anything on the horizon, or is this just a continued 3, 4 times X over the next little while?
So right now we're 35 employees, but it's not even as if we're hiring for growth. We're hiring to catch up. So I think we have a newly hired director of HR who's in the process of hiring 6 more people, because we do all our customer service in-house. We do all our shipping in-house. So we're building out a customer service department, a fulfillment department, a marketing department, and we need people. What's on tap is we need a bigger space now. So we're currently in negotiations to get a 70,000 square foot spot where we're going to have our offices and warehouse all in one. We're going to have a studio in there as well. We're going to have everything centralized that I think is going to help us a lot. And on the marketing side, because we have these new capabilities, we've been testing out television ads, which I'm sure maybe you guys have seen on the NFL and NHL, to really diversify our marketing mix other than just Facebook, Instagram. And it's been going well. It's harder to track, but we did a couple tests and realized that it works. So we're going to be doubling down on that with it's not confirmed yet, but probably a Super Bowl commercial on the Canadian broadcast. So look out for that.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I know starting to see the advertising everywhere. You've got the billboards up with some celebrity endorsements. I love the 13,000-foot skydive commercial where one of your partners decides he's going to jump in boxers, and if people haven't seen that yet, it's entertaining. But it's interesting because we go into an area of marketing and probably stuff for over the years that's been kind of taboo to discuss, right? I mean, you're talking about men's underwear, which has never really been at the forefront of any advertising. It was Fruit of the Loom, and that was pretty much it. The tighty whities, and that was the world we lived in for so long. I mean, now you're talking about your competitors are going to be Saks, Tommy John, a few of these other players, and most of them working with the Mansack pouch type environment. And I love the line off your website, which is the Mansack pouch for crotch area ergonomics. Classic. How do you feel as you go to market with some of the, I guess, the bigger players like a Tommy John and a Saks? And from an advertising perspective, is there anything you guys feel you can't talk about, or is there anything you get any backlash from any of this?
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, for the first point, it has been taboo, but it shouldn't be, right? Like, I mean, what we're creating is similar to like a bra for women, right? And it's a bra for men's undergarments. If you look at most underwear on the market, they'll literally be flat. Like, they'll be flat. So like things will flop around everywhere without any support. So we just wanted to come out with something that supported men, and it shouldn't be taboo. Men need support, right? At the end of the day.
100%. I mean, it's okay. I hear you talk, and I think of Kramer from Seinfeld's Man's Ear episode, and all of that. But you're 100% right. I mean, we're not talking about intimate details here. We're talking about undergarments, which for most things have been going on for advertising for decades and decades from on this side. The fact that it actually happens to be ergonomically designed and well made should not discount us from talking about it.
Exactly. And how we market it, obviously, like there's lines and boundaries, but the way we look at it is it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. So we try to push the line, and we'll see where the line falls, right? So with that skydiving commercial, it's not something that's ever been done. We did it. We pushed it on TV as well, and it's been working well. And what we've noticed is that when we push the boundaries and create something different, it creates lasting impressions. And that's the goal of marketing at the end of the day. And our goal right now internally is just to always keep things fresh so that they don't become redundant. And we're creating something different and lasting impressions to different people, which is why we also started working with some celebrities who genuinely love the product so that it can bring a new, fresh perspective.
Go back a little bit, Rob, to the marketing, and you look at this. Is there an age difference or a segment of the market that you're looking at this differs? Is this a younger generational type thing where they expect comfort, or does this go all the way up to a 75-year-old who's buying underwear? It almost seems to me like it's a little bit generational to a certain degree.
Yeah. I mean, we're targeting men that are looking for comfort at the end of the day. They don't want a flashy brand name across their underwear or clothing in general. We're really a brand that's all about function over fashion. And when you think about the age demo that appeals to, I mean, you could already envision what kind of person that would be, right? Someone that's in their 20s, when they pull their pants down, they probably want colors, patterns, brand names. They don't care about comfort, right? They care about other things. Whereas you have a different type of man that's like, listen, I've been there, done that. Give me something that's comfortable with no BS, and that's what Manmade's about.
Yeah, at 57, I'm all in for the man sack pouch. No doubt, no doubt about it at this stage of my life. So, Rob, we're gonna look at as this is a refresher that you've been on before. We have in the past had your one piece of advice. We're going to play it back for you just so that you can hear what you said the last time, and you can tell us whether anything's deviated or anything's changed.
In the last couple of years, we've learned quite a few little lessons, and we're probably going to continue to learn them. But I'd say the biggest thing that we're learning and continuing to try to focus on is focus itself, is not to spread ourselves too thin when it comes to things like, marketing channels, when it comes to trying to sell our product, whether it be retail, online, whether different types of products, different colors, different styles. I mean, we've been asked a plethora of things from our customers, and it takes real discipline to say, okay, we have a certain vision. This is what we would like to accomplish, and this is what we're going to do. And so far, every time we've kind of went off course, we've not to say regretted it, but it put us a step back. And every time we've been able to remain focused, we've been able to reap the benefits. So I'd say focus is the biggest thing we've been learning.
So, Rob, anything changed for us? Or are you still focused on the focus?
Definitely still focused on the focus. We launched recently pants, but just in black. Everything that we do is all about focus. But definitely something that I've learned since then is just to be careful who you take advice from, because when you're asking for advice, the person that you're asking for most probably doesn't have full context, and therefore cannot give you 100% of what you should be doing or could be doing. But instead ask the question in a way where maybe you were missing a little piece of information, and not to take it with a grain of salt, but just use it as an extra tool in your toolbox, and don't judge that person's perspective fully, because they'll never really have the full context of things.
So, Rob, you bring up an interesting point earlier on a discussion of asking the right people or looking for the answer you get. I mean, you bring up that some people are not always going to have the proper context. I could argue to a certain degree that some people always have a little bit of self-serving in all of this as well. So you got to sift through things. To me, it comes back to one thing at the end of the day. After you've listened to a whole bunch of people, you got to listen to your gut, and gut feeling for most entrepreneurs, I think, is what separates. We'll use a little bit of separates the men from the boys here, separates the boys from your thighs. Same idea. How does what does that look like in your mind? To me, without a good, strong gut feeling, regardless of who's around you, you're going to be in trouble. How do you hone that? How do you develop that? And how confident do you get with that kind of thing?
Naturally, gut feeling is not logical, right? Like, it shouldn't be a thing, but it is. I can't explain what it is, but sometimes it's just you have a decision to make, and you just feel it in your gut that you should be going in a certain direction. And especially at the beginning, it's very hard to listen to it, because you're like, is this right or not? And then what happens is, just as you start to listen to your gut, then you see that 4 out of 6 times or 4 out of 5 times you're right. You start to have more confidence that your gut is telling you and bringing you to the right direction.
I think the more we go along, I mean, we were chatting before we went on air, and we were like, what do you mean I was on here a year ago? It seems like it was like 7 years ago. So much has gone on. I think that plays into a certain degree as well into this whole discussion of gut feeling and experience that goes on. I mean, as an entrepreneur, we go through so many more emotions and so many more experiences than just an ordinary person, I guess, having a job at the end of the day. You're living this, you're breathing this, you never drop it. You take it home with you, you take it to dinner with you. This whole side of how quick you feel the last few years have gone. Just give us a little bit of an insight. And you said you're 35. Some days you probably feel like you're 20, and some days you probably feel like you're 50.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a roller coaster, but I love the ups and I love the downs. I feel like when you're an entrepreneur, like you need to be a risk taker and a gambler at the same time, and you have that urge, and it's definitely true here. Look, today as we're talking, Canada Post declared that they're on a national strike today. So we got massive amounts of packages here that have Canada Post labels on them, and we have to figure out what to do. And here we are, we're talking on a podcast because I know we're going to end up figuring it out.
Well, I think realistically speaking, we're not going to get a big support of entrepreneurial spirit from Canada Post. So let's not expect that to solve your problem in the short term. I guess through all of this. Let's go back a little bit and we'll kind of jump around, which is a little bit like the inside of my head most of the time. I mean, you guys started around, the pandemic had its influences, obviously, in what you were doing. What did you learn from that? And how did you pivot? And, are there things that you can say to other entrepreneurs? We learned this, maybe there's something out of that that's useful to somebody else.
I'll say straight up, like we were lucky, and you obviously need luck in anything that you do, and you have to be grateful for it, and we definitely are. What helped us really in the pandemic is obviously the speed up in online sales, or the online penetration. So before it was hard to start a business because you needed brick and mortar, and brick and mortar is so expensive. I mean, to set up a store, it's going to cost you like 200, 300 grand. And I mean, you're limited to the traffic that you have around there. And now the world's our oyster, right? And specifically, when we look at online penetration right now, it's about 17% of retail sales are done online, which is still tiny, super tiny. But crazy, apparel is 50. So we were really at the right place at the right time, because that number is already massive and there's not many players. And two, it's growing. So that's what helped us.
You touched a little bit before on risk management and this whole element of being a bit of a gambler, which comes with being a bit of an entrepreneur. There's no doubt some days you're throwing the dice at what you're doing, but I think for any entrepreneur, going back to risk management elements and decision making or execution are huge. For years, I always looked at the risk management basically in three silos. There was that first amount of risk that was, it's risky, but it's not the end of the world. If it goes wrong, you make a mistake, you move on, you do this, that. You just keep rotating and finding that right spot. The second is a little more important, has a little more research to it, has a little more of a decision-making model to it, the upside needs to far outweigh the potential downside associated with it. And then the third silo was, holy crap, if we do that and it goes wrong, we're bankrupt. Those to me are the kind of those three areas. How do you look at risk management? How do you guys decide what's risky, what's not risky? Do you do it as a group? Do you do one of you in charge? Like, how do you assess that?
Most of the big decisions we'll do it all together. So we meet 2 times a week to just work on the business and not in the business. And we'll come up with topics such as risk taking. One of our mentors, had told us before we started, is like, listen, you're obviously going to be taking a lot of risks, but what you want to do is make sure that if one thing goes wrong, you're not out of business, right? Like that's the number one thing. At the beginning, it was very hard because literally every move could have put us out of business. Now we're at a bit of a more of a stable spot where we could make bets where we know, okay, well, worst case, we lose X amount, or worst case, this happens, and we're safe. And the other thing I want to touch upon is like economic uncertainty, right? Is the fact that itself is a risk, but doing something about it, I think, is a risk in itself. So in 2022, everyone was talking about how rates were going to rise, and that even Y Combinator was sending emails out to people saying, raise cash, pull back on marketing, be careful. It's the end of the world. That was risk management in their eyes. For us, it was, hey, let's make sure we have a solid business, enough cash to last us if something happens to us, And because everybody's pulling back on marketing, let's double down on marketing. We're going to get better deals. And lo and behold, we're good. And what's even crazier, Mike, is that we're in 2024, rates are falling, and people are saying, be careful because we're going into a recession because rates are falling now. So rates go up, we're in a recession. Rates fall, we're in a recession. If we would do something about it, we would never be moving our business forward.
Well, as Dan can attest to, that's how this whole program started. 16 years ago, after the financial crisis, my partner at the time, Josh Miller, who used to be the host, with Dan, we looked at each other and said, "Now's the time to get into marketing. Let's do some radio. Let's start a radio show." And the rest of our partners looked at us like we were crazy. But here we are 16 years later, because you do things, against what everybody else is doing. My father always told me, when everybody buys, sell, and when everybody else sells, buy. And I think that's it. And it's almost like you and I had this conversation before the show, because my last question to you is about global economic uncertainty, and you jumped right into it, but I want to be a little more specific in terms of how you guys are doing something in terms of trying to future-proof the operations in the face of what we're looking at now. Have you done anything in specific, or is it just constant focus and business as usual in your mind?
Yeah. So when I started in the finance industry, it was 2007. And 1 year later, we had the great financial crisis. And what I noticed and what I took from it was that nobody knows. Because when October came, nobody knew. And the people that did say they knew, they were in cash for 6 months and more. So they missed out on the last run anyways. So what we're trying to do is just make sure that we have a solid business foundation. That's something that you should be doing regardless of economic uncertainty or not, right? And what I'm saying is, like, try to hedge any risk that you have. So for us, it was currency risk because we pay our goods in USD, and at the beginning we were mostly Canada. So we worked out a deal with our bank, RBC, for future contracts. Mm-hmm. So it's something that we knew about already. So we hedged our bets for the next 12 months. We knew what POs we had to hit. Now we just make sure that we are bringing enough USD to cover whatever we have, because I think we're at $1.40 now, which is insane, which could put a business out of business. But those are kind of the things that we're managing, is control the controllables. Now, what's unfortunate is, I'll say it myself, is there's lots of things I still don't know, and I'll probably get hit in the back of the head with things that I didn't know. And it's just like, hey, how can we manage it at that time the best we possibly could?
It's an interesting point, Rob. Over the years, I've said, as I get older and I get more experience and I get more knowledge, I realize I know less than I actually thought I knew before. Right. So the more you seem to gain, the more knowledge you seem to gain, I think that it puts the more out there of consciousness. You start off early on. Sometimes you're kind of blind to what could go wrong. You just go out and do what you have to do. As you start to spend the years, you start to realize, yeah, I don't know this, I don't know that. Touching on hedging, touching on supporting the U.S. dollar is a topic we could probably do a whole show on, for so many people that don't recognize what's out there and the abilities to protect against the fluctuating dollar, not in the spec market, not to try and make money off it, but just to protect a position. So I'm glad you brought that up. And that's pretty much all the time we've got for today, Rob. So I want to thank you so much for your time, your energy, your enthusiasm, the passion that you bring to everything, and no doubt, nice to hear a positive update on where we were not that long ago when you were on the show. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And again, I love the show. Please continue, because you're bringing tremendous value to entrepreneurs out there.
This hour is presented by BDO Canada. Read more thought leadership and expert advice from the BDO team at bdo.ca. Dan Delmar and Mike Newton with you, and our big guest update show rolls on. Up next is Bad Monkey Popcorn. Four brothers with various careers got together to try to change the snack game in Quebec and across Canada. They've done that, they've sold, and now they've started a venture inspiring other entrepreneurs, especially in food and beverage. Here to update us is Fabio Zappilli of the Zappilli Group. I know you've got a lot of news to share, Fabio. Nice to see you again.
Hey, Dan. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for squeezing us in. I know you're in between meetings or joining us from a coffee shop. Now, life has changed a lot for you guys. Let's rewind a few years. So we met you. You guys had this really brilliant idea to take the snack food game to another level here in Canada. Where did the idea for Bad Monkey Popcorn come from?
Yeah, so I used to be a lawyer, and my brother was in finance, working with mortgages with some of the biggest banks in Canada. And although we enjoyed our careers, we really weren't happy, and we were so jealous of all our friends and family that were entrepreneurs. And so we figured, you know what, now or never. So we jumped into the entrepreneurial pool, if you will, and we came up with Bad Monkey Popcorn because as kids, our favorite snack was always popcorn, and we dreamed of working together. The funny part is the reason we call it Bad Monkey was because my mother, poor mother, we always caused trouble as kids, and so that's why we called them Bad Monkey Popcorn. And yeah, so then about 6 years into the journey, we had sold millions of bags. We literally went from my our kitchen to over 15,000 locations in multiple countries. And in 2021, we sold the company to a private equity firm.
Going back to 2021, walk us through that big decision. And that was the big change for you guys. So why did you make the decision? And what were the discussions like between the brothers then?
Yeah, it was really tough because I felt like it was, in a way, it's like you have a child that you've raised for years and suddenly you have to hand it off to somebody else. But I think that our goal from the get-go was to build an amazing business. It was never to have a company for generations. And we felt like it was at a point where we could hand it off to somebody else. And so although we remained, involved in some respects in terms of advising and things like that, it's kind of like putting your kid off to college. At some point you got to pull the plug and take a step back and realize that they could survive on their own.
And now you and one of your brothers are quite busy, and you're helping other entrepreneurs kind of forge their own path, just like you guys did.
Yeah, well, we realized along the way that we really developed a lot of great skills and abilities and experiences that were beneficial, not just to selling millions of bags of popcorn, but helping other companies, whether it was food or even non-food, succeed. Going from like 0 to like 18 million in sales is not something that people do every day, and thankfully we have the experience of doing that from A to Z. And so we said, you know what, let's join forces. Let's provide not just consultation to companies, but we actually walk them through the process of from conception all the way to millions of dollars of sales.
Now, you have a lot of clients that are in food and beverage. I take it the snack game is really competitive. What advice do you have to give them when these days there seems to be just this explosion of snacks? It must be hard to survive in that kind of dog-eat-dog world.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I think connectivity is very important. And it's a word that's used a lot these days, and it's become almost corny. Like, what does it mean to be connected? And like the way we see it, it's very simple. It's understanding what the demographic wants and understanding who your demographic is and how to communicate to those people. So, for example, if your target market is women between the ages of 25 to 45, it's really understanding what they need, what they're looking for. It's about asking more questions than anything. And I think that's the key to it. A lot of people are trying to force their product or force their service on people without truly understanding what their demographic really wants or needs.
What kind of advice are you giving to people, given the global economic uncertainty in recent days? What advice to future-proof businesses would you have for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think obviously future-proofing is pretty much impossible. Let's be honest. Like you can't foresee every angle, but I think that by diversifying your offerings, whether it's by various SKUs or sales channels, is really important. When we were facing COVID, for example, prior to COVID, we were selling only in the grocery stores, right? Hyper focused. And yes, hyper focus is great, but these days you need to be thinking about plan B, C, D. And so COVID forced us actually to focus on direct to consumer e-commerce. And within a very short period of time, we were racking up, hundreds of thousands of dollars per month in sales online in addition to the grocery stores. So it was something that was kind of, I don't want to say forced on us, but we were put in a position where we had to adapt and evolve. And it just opened up so many more doors. So I think the best way to quote unquote future-proof your business is by focusing on more than one channel. I think that's really important. Again, focusing is very important. However, diversifying your offerings is, I think, key to surviving in an uncertain market or an uncertain environment.
When we last spoke at the end of every show, if you remember, we ask our entrepreneurs what their one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs is. And I'm going to play you what you told us last time. Let's see if it still holds up.
For me, it would be don't be afraid or too prideful to ask questions. It's really important to realize what you don't know. And there's a lot of people out there with great advice.
Yeah, I love that. It's so funny. I say to people all the time, it's ask questions. I guess I could restate what I already had said, but I do have another piece of advice. I think that over the years I've learned is think outside the box. And I know that it's such a common catchphrase, but really try to be different. There's so, like you said, there's the market is more and more competitive in every single field, and you need to ask yourself an honest question: what differentiates my product? So if you're making a juice, why is your juice different? How are you conveying the difference to your clientele? If you're selling cars, how are you selling cars different than other car dealerships? Really having an honest conversation with yourself and saying, am I doing something truly different, or am I just copying other people?
And Fabio, a couple of quick follow-ups for the podcast audience. E-commerce, Shopify and others, is that the way to go? Is that the easiest way for someone to set up their e-commerce shop? Or do you prefer the method of kind of building your shop yourself, controlling that e-commerce platform?
Yeah, I mean, again, controlling your destiny is always the best. But and I'm not trying to sell Shopify, but I've advised many people to use Shopify. I think the services are fantastic. I think their offerings are great. Of course, sometimes customer service can be a bit of a pain, but overall, the apps and everything they use, it just facilitates the process. Look, business is really, really hard. If you can simplify one part of your business, go ahead and do it. And so I would highly recommend that you do both, that you have both options, but ultimately Shopify, I think, is the optimal solution in my opinion.
Once you grow to a certain point, do you grow out of Shopify or because they do take a cut as well, and that does rub some entrepreneurs the wrong way. But is that really just the cost of doing business in this game?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's the cost of doing business, and actually more and more large companies are moving to Shopify. Companies that are in the billions of dollars. So sometimes you have to look at what the big boys are doing and say to yourself, maybe they've done their research. So if huge, massive companies are moving there, I think that it's probably the smart play.
Interesting. Social media being on top of trends, you guys had all kinds of wacky flavors that kind of people are talking about online. How online was your brand, and how do you make an online brand interesting and not just kind of clickbait?
Yeah, I think collaborations is super important. So we collaborated with everyone from the NBA to Disney. Really, like, by collaborating, what's great about that is that you get to capture the audience of the company you're collaborating with, and vice versa. And you can also learn from their team too. So it helps elevate yourself while highlighting all the various opportunities. So I think collaboration is something that's more and more popular on social media, and it's something that I advise all my clients to do, because everybody wants to shine themselves, but by associating yourself with a great other company, it just elevates both of you. It's like the sum is greater than the parts.
And lastly, on sort of online brands, when we look at AI and sort of new tech, how does that affect food distribution and how you're sort of trying to popularize food brands online?
Well, AI is actually really interesting in terms of understanding demographics, understanding cash flow management. AI has a lot of role to play, especially in the food business, in terms of even increasing efficiency in production. I can go on for 5 hours about it, but there's a lot of companies out there right now that are specializing in AI specifically for food. AI is really changing the game, right? In so many ways, and a lot of people are afraid of it, but I think it's important to embrace new technologies and not be afraid of it. Look, you don't need to be an AI expert to understand that it can help your business. There's a lot of really simple tools, especially on YouTube, you can use to understand the basics. And once you've understood the basics, that's all you need. The application of AI is more important than understanding how AI works.
What's your favorite AI, by the way? Because I often ask people this question because we have so many that have predated ChatGPT that have been kind of changing the game in many different industries. So in communications, I love Otter. It's a transcription service. It's been super reliable for at least 5 years, way before ChatGPT. What's one of your favorites?
You're going to hate what I say, but to be honest with you, for every entrepreneur, ChatGPT is an amazing resource. Yeah. It is so crazy. Just to even strategize, just to be, hey, look, this is what my options are. What do you think? It's almost like a soundboard. It's like having a co-founder that's not really there. So I know this is maybe an obvious and boring answer, but please, out there, use ChatGPT to the best of its power.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I use it occasionally as well. Huge resource, but you got to check it out. You got to double check it because I can catch mistakes sometimes.
No, absolutely. It's just there to provide alternative ideas. Yeah. I'm not talking about creating emails for you, this and that, but just to have, like I said, a soundboard to put the options out there, and it'll provide you with, let's say, 10 solutions, whatever you ask. For me, it's been super helpful, and actually it's been really helpful for a lot of the entrepreneurs I've consulted.
Well, thanks very much, Fabio. Fabio Zappilli, we appreciate your time and the update. Congratulations to you and your brothers as well. And do stay in touch. Stay part of the growing, inspiring entrepreneurs community.
Pleasure, Dan. Thank you for having me. Appreciate you and everything you guys do.
There you have it, Mike. Fabio Zappilli, now part of the Zappilli Group from Bad Monkey Popcorn. So unlike our previous two entrepreneurs, they've decided to sell, they've moved on, and now are inspiring other entrepreneurs with their business and helping them navigate the complicated world of e-commerce.
I love the three guests because my goal is always to try and tie things together. And when I look at this, the three guests today, to me, are all about looking for tomorrow as much as they are dealing with today. I mean, that whole discussion and the question that we raised in terms of what are you future proofing? You can't see the future. The three of them will tell you the same thing. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Yet they're all focused on what tomorrow is. So, you look at it and you take Lufa Farms, the comment was the pandemic was a limited time. But, foresight afterwards is important. We know there's going to be a tomorrow. The question is, how do we get ourselves there and just not get so lost? But every one of our guests today focuses sticking to tomorrow, despite the situation, stick to your fundamentals and go forward accordingly.
Don't forget, you can read more thought leadership and expert advice from the BDO team at bdo.ca. Coming up next week, Monsieur Cocktail. You probably noticed these elixirs in the grocery store near the sodas or near the alcohol. They've had an amazing success story, and Patrice Plante joins us about his at-home mixology business and how they took off during the pandemic. Don't forget to like and subscribe on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, or your favorite platform. Lots more bonus content on every single episode and more new episodes to come in the new year. Thanks, Mike.
Always a pleasure to work together, Dan. Thank you.
ThinkBait. TNKR Media. Good talk.